Welcome back to another episode of Around the 412. I am Tyler. Joining me, as always, is my co-host Smitty. Be sure to go check us out on all of our social medias, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Go subscribe to us on YouTube. Leave us some comments. Leave us some 5-star ratings. Whatever you can do on each of those platforms, that really helps us out a lot, and we appreciate all of that. As well as we have some GoFundMes and some t-shirt shops linked in the description of our show on all the last listening platforms and on YouTube as well. So go check those out as well. Without further ado, let's get into the sode.
Love it. That's pretty fast the way that you ran through that. But yeah, everything, the whole spiel that we used to give, all those links are in the description of it wherever you're watching or listening. I don't know if you mentioned Facebook. That's the one thing.
Yeah,
Come on, dude.
I forget about Facebook. I have a Facebook, and I post to it whenever I post something on Instagram because it posts automatically onto Facebook.
Yeah.
But I kind of forget that I have Facebook every now and again. I have said to people that I use Facebook for, it seems like, two things: Facebook memories, and I use it for marketplace for whether that is pages I'm a part of to buy like sports memorabilia, or I've used it for marketplace to, like, we bought a dresser off there, and that's about it. I don't really browse Facebook like I did when I was a wee lad back in the day.
Yeah, same actually. I don't really use Facebook too much other than to put the show up and stuff
other
like
than when
that.
you deactivate your Twitter and you have to go to Facebook.
That's true.
And then you treat Facebook like Twitter, and you basically live tweet everything on Facebook.
Oh, it's so good. Anyway, let's get into the show. Like you said, we normally discuss where we want to start off beforehand. We didn't, breaking the fourth wall here and just being totally transparent as to the way that the show is going to go. Let's start with the Steelers opening up OTAs this week. First and foremost, signing Markus Golden, helping out some edge depth. This is a really nice piece. 32 years old, just 2 sacks last year, but the pass rush win rate, man, that was kind of a pass rush win rate. Say that 5 times fast. Was still there for him, and coming off 10.5 sacks 2 years ago. So I really like this signing. I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, here we go, another Melvin Ingram situation where you got this veteran that, you know, has had the production that he has had through his career and won't be comfortable in an edge 3 role. I don't see it that way for a couple of reasons. One, because I think it's pretty clear that Markus Golden isn't that same player. He has taken a little bit of a step back while he's still being a very good player. And also, Alex Highsmith is a lot more proven than he was when we brought in Melvin Ingram, and people thought that he was going to, like, be the guy for some reason. Maybe in Melvin Ingram's head, he was also going to take that role because we saw how that played out. But I don't see the similarities there. I'm really excited about the signing, though, because we were talking about it last week, like, man, something happens to TJ or Alex, or even just, like, you know, for 15 to 20 snaps a game when those guys need breathers, who right now was edge 3. So to bring in a guy like Markus Golden, who's done what he's done in this league, I think it was necessary, and I'm happy it's a guy like him that's been so productive.
Yeah, for signing a player that's not going to be a starter, it's a position that tends to be more exciting than a normal backup position, but we kind of have talked about it when we address the defense. Some of the positions that we're still unsure of when it comes to depth is the linebacker positions, and especially on the outside. After TJ and Alex, you don't really have a lot of depth behind those two. So I think this is different than Melvin Ingram, because I don't think that they would have, and I don't think that the Steelers necessarily promised Melvin Ingram a lot of playing time whenever he signed with Pittsburgh either. But I think that Golden knows the situation he's coming into. He sees that there's a clear 1-2 with the starters, and they're going to use him as that outside linebacker or edge 3 role. And I feel like he wouldn't have signed here if he wasn't okay with that. But I do think that this helps the depth a lot. I'm sure he will play. That seems just how it's never just going to be those 2 guys on the outside. So having somebody that can come in that has shown production at the NFL level, and like you said, he has taken a step back, but he can still be a productive player when called upon. And whenever he is going to be called upon in those smaller sample size, maybe that'll even help a little bit more keep his production up as he ages as well. But I think it's a good signing for the position. It's a much needed depth of that position, and I think there's a clear cut outside linebacker 3 on the Steelers now, and I feel much more comfortable going into this throughout this offseason further with the outside linebacker depth as it is now, as opposed to just yesterday.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to know exactly how like the whole Ingram thing played out, but like, so it's just speculation. But I like, to me, the way, like from the outside looking in, I think it was Melvin Ingram underestimating Alex Highsmith and thinking he would be able to take over that role. Because at that time, like going into 2021, like we didn't know what we had in Alex.
Yeah.
Like it was a very small sample size that he played pretty well as like the third guy. And then when Bud went down with his ACL, he played well. But it was a relatively unproven commodity. At this point, we know what Alex is, and he likely, again, another thing to note here as we get into the OTAs kicking off, it came out that they've opened up contract extension talks. Like his agent has been in contact with the Steelers. I just, again, like I think I've brought this up before, and it's so weird to say about a guy that's only been on the team for like 3 seasons. It's hard for me to envision him like being anywhere else. Like I think that he going to take less than he could get on the open market to stay a Steeler and stay playing on the other side of TJ, because I just feel like he has so much like wherewithal for his situation. He understands that the grass isn't going to be greener. He's very comfortable here. And yeah, like I think that he's gonna get paid pretty well. I think he'll get, around 15 million a season. But if he hits the open market, he's getting 18 to 20, and I just don't see that happening in Pittsburgh. I think he knows it's not happening in Pittsburgh, and I don't think that needs to happen for him to re-sign here. I think he's totally okay with getting, a number closer to what I was talking about.
I think so too. And like you said, if he leaves Pittsburgh, there's no guarantee. I mean, it depends on the team, but it's assuming he leaves for the money. He's going to be going and being the outside linebacker 1 on a team. And when he does that, he's going to be targeted. It's not going to be the same thing as whenever you have TJ Watt on the other side of you. So I think that would be smart to stay in Pittsburgh, and he's definitely going to consider that. I said, and it was actually during the live show that you and Derek were doing when we were talking about Highsmith, my sweet spot for him getting a really modest raise, but also being able to stay in Pittsburgh and not being priced out, was actually 18 million a season. I said, yeah, 3 by 54 is what I would do. And I think that would be a good deal for him, where he does get the value that I think he deserves, because I feel like a lot of people that don't really look into the situation of like outside linebackers or edge rushers in the NFL and what contracts go for. Alex Highsmith, especially if he has a really productive season this year, building off of what he did last year, he will price himself out of Pittsburgh unless he wants to stay that badly. I mean, this is a really premium position, and teams are going to pay for it if you're productive. And he was on the right track last year, continues this year. That's why I think it's very smart for the Steelers to get this locked up now, because one, and this is selfish from the Pittsburgh mentality, but they kind of have to look at it this way. We can't afford to have you have another good season and then talk contract with you. So they have to get it out of the way now. Also, who was it that tweeted the extension or the extension talks, and it was Chris Wormley, the picture
that was
and it
Dov.
Just had a little Dov Kleiman. It just had a little.
I don't even know if that's a real person, by the way. Like
I don't know.
I'm still
he
like
changed his Avi, I think, for the first time ever.
I'm blocked.
Are you?
He has me blocked because I said I'm not sure if Dov Kleiman is a real person. He searches his name, so he blocked me.
Oh well,
tag him or anything.
He tweeted a picture of Chris Wormley. A great form tackle, by the way. Yeah.
And it's just like this much.
It's
of
just
Alex
a little
in the
sliver of Alex Highsmith. It's like he's there. And Alan Saunders said it was like the Where's Waldo of like announcements. It's just like you gotta find him.
I saw Dougie Fresh reply to that and say something like Alex looks great in this picture or something like that, and he like cropped just the portion that he was in.
It's just like his left shoulder or something like that. It's so funny. But another thing about Alex Highsmith that would be weird though if he did leave Pittsburgh is like, so we were saying how we can't imagine him being in another organization. I can't imagine Sam Highsmith, his dad, being a fan of any other team.
True.
He's ingrained into Pittsburgh Steelers Nation's culture already. And so I just can't imagine him flipping sides. I mean, even if his son leaves, I gotta wonder, is he still going to be a Steelers fan?
Listen, once a Steeler, always a Steeler. I'm sure that he will definitely. He's obviously like his number one team is going to be wherever Alex is playing. He's going to be rooting for the Steelers when they're not playing Alex's team. 100%.
Yeah. It's hard for me to see it any other way.
Yeah. I want to bring up another thing with Alex because like I understand the position that some people have where it's like, can you really pay 2 edge rushers? And you can find a guy to give you some production. Obviously, not what Alex has given them on the other side of TJ, because that's been even greater than what they've gotten from Bud on the other side. But what I say to that is, I'm not looking. I think you can look at it like the defensive front as a whole. And right now, you're paying 2 guys pretty good money in TJ and Cam, but Cam's contract ends not this upcoming season, but after the following one. And you can kind of structure Alex's deal where you're not paying him like significant money until that point anyway. So I think you can kind of set it up where you're still just paying 2 high-end contracts along that defensive line, but instead of TJ and Cam, it ends up being TJ and Alex down the road.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And look at the rest of the defense. I mean, you've got Minka who's getting paid, but outside of those like big 3, there's not a lot of money going out on the defense. Your corners aren't making a lot of money. Your middle linebackers aren't making a lot of money. And there's a lot of young people that they could get paid eventually. Like Joey Porter Jr. could be paid eventually. But he's a rookie this year. So you're in a position where if you're going to pay 2 edge rushers, and especially that amount of money, you're in the situation where you can do it easily and not really hurt yourself too much. Because you have the luxury of having some young contracts on the defense, and plus there's just not a lot of people to pay that are worth getting extensions like that.
Yeah, there's some like middle ground contract, like Odin Joby's deal, I think is somewhat, Cole Holcomb for a middle linebacker. He's making okay money. But yeah, I mean,
but they're not like TJ. They're not like Minka. Like we're not talking about like huge lucrative contracts.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think that again, I just keep going back to the point where I don't look at it as like 2 edge rushers. I'm looking at it as, 2 premium defensive players that you're paying, and they both play in the defensive front. So just, exit Cam, insert Alex's contract. So I brought that up to Derek on his live stream that he did last Friday. And yeah, that it actually entered my mind as we were talking about it. Like that wasn't a preconceived idea in my head. I was just thinking about it. But yeah, let's talk a little.
I was just gonna say it makes sense because I think you should look at it from not just what positions you're playing, but like who brings you the most value on defense.
Yeah,
and positionally, Alex brings you.
Yeah, I'm not going to say I would absolutely not say that he's more valuable than TJ. Don't get me wrong, but what I'm saying is, look at where they rush from. And Alex is rushing the left tackle, which for most teams is the stronger side. They play their better tackle on the left side, and that's the quarterback's blind spot. So, I think that at the very least, I'm not saying he's more valuable than TJ, but he's, probably the second most valuable spot on the defense at the very least. So, I mean, again, I have no qualms about paying him. People will bring up, the production without TJ. 3.5 sacks or something in 7 games. By the way,
look at the entire defense's production without TJ.
What was it say? That's still 8 for a season. Like at that pace, like it's not like that's just some.
It's not a scrub.
Yeah. So in the opposite of say it wasn't TJ, right? Say it's also not going to be Malik Reed. Like you're going to have somewhere in the middle of that on the opposite side of Alex, somewhere else. So I think he's a double-digit sack guy for sure. And the thing is like he's still not there yet. Like he still is pretty much just a speed rusher. Like if he really, really comes into his own and develops a little bit more, he had 14.5 last year. I mean, he could easily eclipse, 16 in next season. So I'm interested to see how this thing plays out. By all accounts, it sounds like, he's optimistic about an extension. It sounds like the other side is optimistic. Like Omar Khan very early in the offseason said, this is a priority for us. And look at everything that's happened since then. Now, I'm not saying that got put on the back burner. He was lying about it being a priority. It's just this time of year is typically when that starts to happen. A contract extension talk anyway for a guy going into this season. So I'm interested to see how it plays out. Prediction, I do think it gets done. So I'll be very happy when that's done and we can stop talking. Also, we're going to know, like, by the way, like last year we saw like when Deontay's agent was in camp 2 days later, he signs a new deal.
Yeah.
We're going to know when Alex's agent is there. And then all of a sudden you're going to see within the next like 48 hours, probably a deal get done.
Yeah. And maybe Alex can make his 3rd appearance on Around the 4-2 after the deal gets done.
That would be awesome. Would be our, like, cause Mink has been on obviously, and he made a good amount of money afterwards, but Alex might be the richest man once he comes on, if that were the case.
That's true. That is true.
So, but we will see. We'll see how that all plays out. I want to ask you with OTAs beginning now. I think first thing that we're looking at here is who gets the reps at left tackle to start. I think that's going to be an interesting battle to see how much time goes on before or if we see Broderick Jones kind of take over with the ones. I wanted to ask you if there's anything like really intriguing to you though, like storyline wise, other than that, as we go through OTAs. I'll let you go first so I don't steal them. I have a couple things in mind. I think we might cross over on some of our thoughts here, but is there anything with OTAs opening up that you're kind of looking for? It's football in shorts, so like you're not going to learn a whole lot. But...
Yeah. No, I do think left tackle is probably the most intriguing thing entering OTAs with Dan Moore Jr. and Broderick Jones. I think that running back outside of the top two is an interesting position looking at the Steelers going forward. You don't really have a clear-cut RB3 after Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris, so I think that's another interesting position. And I think that looking at what happens with how they approach the cornerback position of what we've been talking about, like how they deploy guys, whether they're playing in the nickel or who's playing in the nickel, I guess I should say, and who's getting deployed on the outside, what those like reps look like. That's something that's interesting to me because you and I have really just kind of made a rough draft of what we think the defense could look like on the outside in nickel package, but we really don't know until we actually see them play football. And I think you're going to get a glimpse of the idea of what the Steelers are going to like to play with defense, like schematically in their secondary. And so that's another position that I'm looking at, just like who's getting reps at nickel, and then like basically like how much is Joey Porter Jr. starting on the outside versus like other players. And also like Corey Trice, is he playing yet? Is he healthy enough to participate?
That's a good question. I don't know the extent of what he's doing. I've seen pictures of him on the field and stuff. So he's in some capacity.
I would just be interested if he's healthy, like what's he look like post injury and playing there as well. But that's just off the top of my head, the major ones that I think. The one that we really haven't talked about a lot on the show that I just like thought of was running back, because after Najee and Jaylen Warren, I just don't think there's a clear-cut RB3. I mean, Anthony McFarland could be it, but he hasn't really shown enough in the past couple seasons with the Steelers, and I think there's an argument to be made that the Steelers can move on from him pretty easily.
Yeah, I do think he's probably the leader in the clubhouse when you look at it right now, because it's like, how could he not be? It's just kind of by default. I think that's why it's so interesting with the Master Teague being cut when he was, because a lot of people were wondering if he would possibly like take that leap and end up being the RB3. I think if it's not McFarland, it's probably somebody not currently on the roster. Like, I don't see another guy right now on this team that I could see making the 53. I'm rooting for, and I forgot his last name already. Alfonso something, the HBCU kid they signed from the rookie camp that they actually gave a contract to. If I could find it here now, should have been prepared for this. Alfonso Graham, the running back.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see, because he's got a lot of juice. I'm curious to see if he can kind of make a mark here. But OTAs, like I said, it's football in shorts. It's hard to learn a lot of things. But you go back to last year, like OTAs is when we started getting, like when we learned about George Pickens. He was doing some crazy things, and that's when the hype train started right then and there. So, who's going to be that guy this year? It could be, on the defensive side, Joey Porter Jr. It was interesting. I saw Nick Farabaugh tweeted out a video of Darnell Washington, and pretty clumpy route that he ran. He's not winning because of his route running. That's not what makes him the player that he is.
Look at his route running at Georgia. It wasn't he's not a route runner. He is a big dude. That's how he wins at the catch point. He's just
Could
big.
you imagine if he could run routes like Calvin Austin?
He was that size, but he ran like Deontay.
Yeah, it'd be hilarious. But that's just, so that video surfaced and that was obviously a talking point and stuff. But he's obviously going to be somebody that's very interesting to watch as the process goes on here, because I'm just curious as we get into game action and stuff, how many snaps a guy like that is going to play. I think Connor Hayward's an interesting one to watch, because it doesn't seem like he's really involved with the tight ends anymore.
Yeah.
I
wasn't
think
in the picture. And as we all know, social media tells everything.
Absolutely. And they've used that picture a ton. But he also hasn't been in the meetings with them, people have said as well. So
I'm also curious for RB3. So I was just curious to look back, because I didn't really remember him playing special teams at all. But Anthony McFarland, not a special teams guy. in 3 years in Pittsburgh, he has 8 career snaps on special teams.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, okay, but so Steven Sims signed elsewhere. If he ends up being like the returner, then sure, he could make the roster that way, like being the return man in RB3. But if you're viewing that spot as like, Anthony Miller's or, going back to Gunner, or I know there's that undrafted kid Bird that could potentially win that job. I mean, kickoffs, especially with, Larry Bird, especially with, the new role, they're trying to make them as obsolete as possible.
Yeah.
I don't know how much they're going to even covet giving somebody a role just for that. But yeah, special teams is going to be how somebody makes that RB3 spot. And to your point, Anthony McFarland hasn't done a whole lot. He hasn't been available to do it a whole lot. So
yeah, he only has 8 snaps on special teams. 0 came in 2020, which he only had. Well, actually, 2020 was his most. He had his most snaps in his career. But he had 8 snaps in 2021, 0 snaps on special teams last year.
Yeah, it's tough because, like, I remember I was talking with Derek about this too. It's like he was cooking guys as a route runner in camp last year, but if he can't stay on the field, now as an RB3, like, I don't know how much he's going to be playing in game anyway. But we know how Tomlin is, man. Like, if you're not available, I'm surprised they haven't given up on him already, to be quite honest with you. It's that, I guess that just goes to speak, to his talent. The fact that he's still hanging around, given that he hasn't been available to them much.
He went to Maryland. So, Tomlin's not going to cut him that easily.
That buys you one season at least.
It does. Also, massive L for the Steelers with in the all-name team with cutting Master Teague.
Yeah, that's true too.
Shout out to
just a weird time.
All-name team.
It was a very weird time for them to make those cuts. They cut 3 players and signed one, and now obviously, why am I blanking on who they just signed? Markus Golden coming in. That's another roster spot there.
First I thought you meant running back, and I'm like, I don't know.
No.
Who did they?
No. So they're up to 88 guys, I think, right now of the allotted 90 that you can be at for the time being. Then obviously it has to go down to 53, and it's not in waves anymore either. So
when is that deadline?
You're asking the wrong guy.
Let's see. When? Why the heck can I not? Why is my computer acting up? 53.
Oh wait, that's from 2021, so that won't help.
This is great content. August 29th.
There we go. There it is. August 29th.
Okay. So it's later. I didn't know if it was like earlier in camp.
Oh no, because you gotta go through the preseason. Like, they're not gonna have guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
dude, imagine evaluating 40 players that you're going to cut.
It's tough. It's tough business. It's cutthroat business. I do want to touch on, since you're the one that brought him up. If you didn't, I was going to. Obviously, we've already talked about the RB3, the slot corner. I keep bringing it up. I feel like I'm, beating a dead horse at this point. I just don't see it. Whatever their vision is, I'm having a hard time seeing it, because Shannon Sullivan talked about it after day one that he was getting the majority of the snaps there. I have a hard time feeling like he can be a serviceable player for them there based off his body of work.
He stinks. Watch the Minnesota Vikings last year. He stinks.
And it's like, I can understand, people saying like, oh, well, maybe a change of scenery or something like that. It's not like Minnesota was the only place he's played and was bad. Like, he's had some other stops. I just have a hard time believing that all of a sudden, like, Pittsburgh's going to be the perfect fit for him. And okay, like, say it is, and they do strike gold on this, and he's a fine player for them. 1, incredibly lucky that was the case. And 2, if he's not, like, what's the backup plan? Like I just, there's no contingency here if Shannon Sullivan
Trey
is good,
Norwood.
at least the way I'm looking at it. Yeah, I mean, Trey Norwood's played some slot.
They might as well.
Yeah, Peterson's played like 20 snaps over the last 2 years there. Are they? Honestly, I brought up the idea to Derek. Why do we talk about Derek so much? Of Corey Trice, not because he doesn't like profile like a typical corner, but specifically to cover tight ends. Like, you look at the way that Cincinnati was using Flowers last year, because he's a massive corner, about the same size as Trice. And specifically, he was a tight end matchup. Could the Steelers potentially use Trice in that way. Like, this is your role. You're going to be covering tight ends when they line up in the slot.
Him, Joey Porter Jr., Patrick Peterson, all in the field at once. That's long. That's a long secondary.
Just put Luke Barku out there somewhere.
Yeah. Let's just throw him
James
out
Pierre
there.
is
Rover.
Pretty big too, comparatively. Isn't Levi Wallace might be 6'1", even. Who's their smallest corner?
Let's see.
Probably. I mean, it's Shannon Sullivan. Dot has to be, but
I don't know. But I like the idea. Just from looking at, you have no other options, so you might as well get experimental with it. Like, after Shannon Sullivan, you don't have any viable options. Like, you don't have a clear cut. Like, we don't have Cam Sutton anymore. We don't have Mike Hilton anymore. Anybody who is clear cut, that is our slot guy. We don't have that. So they're going to have to experiment in order to be able to fill that role. And so I think it would be smart to test that out, and having a big slot corner that could be really good with matchups. So let's look at the corners and how tall they are. So we got Corey Trice, who is 6'3", my guy. Chris Wilcox is 6'2". Okay. I'm just looking at the entire roster.
All right.
He's 6'2". Levi Wallace is 6 foot. Shannon Sullivan is 5'11". That's basically Smitty's height. Yep. Joey Porter Jr. 6'2", James Pierre 6'2", Patrick Peterson 6'1", and then Luke Barku 6'1", Madre Harper. I don't know why I'm saying his name, but he's on the roster, 6'1".
Yeah,
they've only got
crazy.
One guy that's under 6 foot.
That's wild,
and it's their worst one.
Definitely their worst one that has a chance to start.
Yeah.
It's really hard to envision a world where he should be just handed this job seemingly as the starting slot corner, but that's the world we're living in right now. Unless, we see they brought in Golden this week. I don't think that they are done, just because of the point in the season where we're at. Still feel like, okay, especially because of the way it's going to happen this year, going from 90 to 53 immediately, I feel like that could be a great spot to find a nickel right then from somebody else's roster. So between that and off-ball linebacker, I think they still got to be on the lookout to add to this defense.
I think so too. I mean, there's some clear-cut needs. Even if day one we have our starters on the team right now, I'm not comfortable with it at certain positions, and so it would make sense for them to add.
All right, well, that will do it for Steelers talk for this week. Hopefully, a lot more information next week. It'll be interesting to see as we work through OTAs, the information that we can gather. Speaking of gathering information, a lot to talk about on the Penguins front, and we're going to do that when we come back. This is Around the 412. Stay here. All right, welcome back to Around the 412. I'm Smitty. That is Tyler. Markus Golden wasn't the only one to visit Pittsburgh this week. Kyle Dubas, former Toronto Maple Leafs GM, was in Pittsburgh, actually in Cranberry at the Lemieux Complex, meeting with the team, meeting with Captain Sidney Crosby until at least 10 p.m. This was a very early day for Kyle Dubas and a very long night in Pittsburgh for him. Mm-hmm. And kind of I'll say last minute candidate almost, just because it seemed like he wasn't going to be available. It seemed like it was going to be Toronto or nothing. It seemed like he was kind of saying that with the intent that it was going to be Toronto. I don't think he expected to be let go the way that it happened. Shanahan, we don't know how those conversations went. We're never going to know, I don't think, especially with Dubas not really saying his piece on it. He took the high road. The way that it seems from the outside, though, is Dubas maybe made a play to get a little bit more money or something. He wanted to kind of change the way that things operated, the chain of command, because it was so complex. But he ultimately came back and said he wanted to be in Toronto. Shanahan didn't want to wait around, and they pulled the plug on it, which took a lot of people by surprise. including players. And apparently those exit meetings did not go well with the players. So all in all, this isn't a Leafs podcast though. How does this affect the Penguins? Dubas hits the market, and it seemed like, according to Elliot Friedman, the Penguins were actually ready to name a general manager. And then, wait, Kyle Dubas is available? Seemingly FSG's number one candidate. They got to talk to him. So they request permission to talk to him. That's granted. They bring him into Pittsburgh. He, of course, also would have had to have wanted to talk to them for this to happen. So he was here on Tuesday. This is now Wednesday when we're recording, probably Thursday when you guys are watching or listening. And a lot of information surrounding this. Now, I've been told, and, if this goes down, oh, well, I'm willing to rely on the people that I've gotten this from. The ball's in Kyle Dubas' court as we sit here right now. The job, the money, the role, that's been ironed out. It's been offered to him. It's a matter of Kyle Dubas accepting the job. And with him, we've already kind of seen him talk about it with, the Toronto situation stuff. Comes down to family. He's talking over with his family. If all things are good to go on his side, everything is absolutely good to go on the Penguins side. And Kyle Dubas is going to be the next general manager of the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Imagine being the guy that was going to get offered the job before this whole Dubas situation happened.
Yeah, Matthew Darsh.
Yeah, you were waiting on that. You're waiting on that call. You're waiting on that text, and then all of a sudden you get an update that the Penguins are meeting with Kyle Dubas, and you're like, "What the hell? Who's this guy?"
Yeah, I know.
But no, I think that it is fascinating. The last 36, however many hours after 3 days, or 48, 72 hours. Dude, the whole GM situation, it seemed like Dubas was out of it until a few days ago.
Yeah.
And now it seems like it's like anybody but Dubas seems like it is wrong. And it's not going to be the case. And like you're saying, if the ball is in Dubas's court, I wonder what some of those conversations were like in Pittsburgh on Tuesday. And I'm really curious what the conversation with Sidney Crosby was like, because he met with Sidney Crosby late. And so I wonder what that went down. Basically,
probably trying to figure out how many more years he's going to play.
that is probably a talking point. He also probably was basically like, and I feel like from Crosby's perspective, hey, are you going to try to let us win, or what are you going to do here? Because even though FSG's the owner and we've got a president and all that sort of stuff, I am the captain here. This is my ship and I run it. So how are you going to do as my GM? And maybe that's hyperbole and everything, but I feel like Crosby is the type of player that has that much pull where he is going to have a say in the GM as much as any player could have in who could be the GM. So I think from that perspective, Crosby is probably looking at what kind of GM he's going to be if he come in. How's he going to end my career? But I also look at this from Dubas's perspective, and unless you are dead set, like you think you can win a Stanley Cup in the next couple of years with Sidney Crosby and the rest of this core, would you want the Penguins, and not just Dubas, anybody, any GM, anywhere, would you want to come to the Penguins in their current state? And that's a genuine question, because I look at it from you just missed the postseason. The team is old. You have an aging core, which is still playing at a high level, but they are aging. You have a lot of bad contracts. You have 8 no movement clauses, and you have nothing in terms of a farm system. So would you really want to take this over? And of course, a lot of guys are very competitive, and they probably like the challenge, and they'd probably see what they could happen if they were the GM. But it's not like the Penguins outside of that. It's that organization, and you get to be the GM with that player or those players. I don't view it as that attractive as a job on the outside looking in, because of all the skeletons in that closet right now.
I don't know if it's because of being a Penguins fan and obviously having that bias within the fandom, or what, but I almost view it as, kind of the best of both worlds, where you're going to be able to compete right now. You think, I know they didn't make the playoffs this year, but I feel like they have a good enough roster that they could next season, given and I say good enough roster, meaning the stars playing the way that they were this year. There's obviously still a ton of holes for this GM to plug away in year one, basically immediately needing to step in and do so. But also, like you said, I think that, a lot of guys look at it and want that challenge, like want to see what they can rebuild, have a vision, a long-term plan in place. So let's finish out the career of these three, icons in Pittsburgh and see what we can do with that. And then the new challenge begins of rebuilding this thing to try to get back to that point. And also going to be paid pretty well in the process of doing so with FSG running things. So I don't think that hurts also when you look at the ownership group that's above the GM. I would say, so my answer would be, in general, like if you're talking about league wide, looking at all the potential GM spots, it's probably middle of the pack, but at the same time, it's like one of 32 possible anyway, and how many are open.
Yeah.
Like for Dubas specifically, it's been talked about Pittsburgh. I know, like, I don't even know if it's a rumor or if it's just the fans trying to get it to happen. Ottawa being talked about as well. But for him, like, again, I think it's kind of like, for the now, you have the situation that you do, trying to squeeze everything out of this core as possible. And then, the challenge of what is likely going to not be a short turnaround. And you have to kind of have that voted confidence from ownership that you're going to have a long leash to try to turn it around. That seems like a fun, and I'm putting that like in air quotes, project for a guy that has that long-term vision. And he's a young dude, so he can be around.
He's only 37. Yeah. I looked it up because after we heard about
32.
After we heard about the Crosby conversation, because I wanted to know, like, how close are they in age? And Crosby is going to be 36 this year. 36. And Dubas is 37.
Why?
Not sure if he's turning 38. But they're super close in age, which is really weird, just thinking about a GM that young. But, and maybe this is very, I don't know if ignorant is the right word. I just don't know a lot about all the other GM openings enough, because I'm not a fan of that team. But I feel like the Penguins, more so than other openings, could be. I view the spot as very high risk, high reward as a GM, because I look at what Ron Hextall inherited, and it was very much a high risk, high rewards situation where we have the tools, or we have the players, and we have the cash to be able to be the high reward team and get you to that Stanley Cup. But there's also the high risk aspect of it, and we saw that with Ron Hextall this past season, where if you do too much or you screw it up, then you're going to be gone. And I feel like that's how I would view the Penguin spot right now, with Dubas or anyone else. I think it's a high risk, high reward situation. High risk of you're coming in and you have to, one, try to win still with the players that you have, because you still have this core playing at such a high level that you need to. And also you have to rebuild the farm system where they have like 2 prospects worth a damn thing. But after that, I think that Dubas is up for the job, and I think that it'd be really cool to see him in Pittsburgh. I like a lot of what he did with Toronto. Obviously, no GM's perfect. If you look at their entire tenure, there's going to be signings, there's going to be trades where you question it, wherever any GM is from. No GM hits 100%, but I think that he did a lot of good things at Toronto. It would excite me to have somebody like that in Pittsburgh. And I think that Dubas is an aggressive GM, which is something that I like, but I also think he's a smart GM. So I think there is a good balance of that. Of you kind of get like the best of both worlds, where he's into the analytics and he's into the young players and building up prospects. Because I think the Toronto Marlies, you saw some good prospects from them, and you saw some good drafts from Dubas, but also you were able to be aggressive. I mean, they went after and they got John Tavares, for freaking sake. I mean, then they were able to keep and sign, whether the people like the contracts or not. They did the impossible in signing not only John Tavares to that what was that, 8-figure contract? Because 7 figures is $1 million. 8-figure contract, but also Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner. So I feel like it would be a really good and fun GM tenure in Pittsburgh. Hopefully fun. Honestly, I don't know if we thought the Ron Hextall tenure could be fun. We were just hoping it wouldn't be as bad as it was. But no, I think it's it just seems like it's Dubas until it's not now. Which, if you asked me just last week on our show, I didn't think Dubas was going to come to Pittsburgh. It just seemed like it was written off at that point. But now it just seems like it is Dubas until it's not. And I think it's really interesting that he was in Pittsburgh for that long, and hopefully his wife likes fries on her salads, because I feel like that could be the only thing holding it up.
It was Dubas who you've wanted all along, because I think a lot of people, whether it's just name recognition or, I mean, you look at the roster that Toronto consistently had, it's as good of a roster around the NHL. They obviously couldn't get over the hump there, but I don't know that you can blame that on the roster construction. Like, the roster was in place, and that's Dubas's job. So was Dubas the guy that you've kind of wanted all along if he were available, or, where were you at with
if he was available, I would say Dubas would probably be at the top of my board. And I mainly look at what Toronto was able to do with cap flexibility and to able to maneuver the cap the way they did, to be able to dress the rosters that they did, as well as some of the moves that he made. I just think he was a really good GM, and it's going to be one that is not going to be I feel like remembered enough in Toronto, just because they didn't get over that hump, and so that's going to be a knock on him forever in Toronto. But outside of not getting over the hump, I mean, they did this year. They got past the first round, but then they got knocked out. But if you look at just the rosters that he had in those several years, you look at those and it's like, how did these teams not get over the hump? Well, they play the Washington Capitals in 2018 when the Caps won the Cup. They play the Boston Bruins. They play the Tampa Bay Lightning. Like, they were going against really good teams, and I don't think it's fair to hold Dubas against that the entire way. I think that just matchups as well are part of the reason that they never got over that point. But yeah, just from looking at it, I think I want somebody that is able to build a roster like that and build a very aggressive roster while also being smart with your cap. Because I just think having 3 contracts over $10 million on that team and still being able to field or ice a team that is very competent offensively and is structured in a way that you're not like flirting with a really bad line at all times, because that's something that a team like that you would feel like they have, is a really bad bottom 6, kind of like what the Penguins had last year. And the Penguins don't have anywhere near those top contracts that Toronto did. So I think that, yeah, from that standpoint, I would love to have him as the GM, and he would have been my top spot if he was available. I just didn't think he would be available, and I didn't know how much interest he'd actually have in Pittsburgh, assuming that he could have stayed in Toronto. Obviously, that didn't work out, but then that opened the door completely.
I mean, I think he's much better than Ron Hextall. That goes without saying, but it is funny that, like, maybe the biggest knock on Dubas in his tenure has been finding a goalie. Like, and that's what we're talking about in Pittsburgh right now, and probably one of the bigger knocks when you look at Hextall as well in his tenure. Obviously, bunch of different things for him, but yeah, that's the big one for me. Looking at Dubas's time in Toronto is just not being able to find that goalie. For me, I wanted Tulsky, the assistant GM in Carolina. He was kind of my number one, and Dubas and kind of everybody else kind of like once we got past that first round of interviews where we got rid of those like old time hockey retreads that were
Mark Bergevin.
Yeah, Peter Chiarelli's, like the guys that were just getting interviews as like a courtesy, basically. Once we got past that group, and it was like Tulsky, Darsh, Greeley, obviously now Dubas, McKinnon, like any of those guys, I would have been fine with. Tulsky was my number one. Pretty much everybody else at number 2. At this point, with it seeming like the team is zeroed in on Dubas, I'm all in. Like, that's clearly, if it ends up not being Kyle Dubas, it's because of Kyle Dubas, and they ended up settling for their second option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And when that does happen, when he does sign in Pittsburgh, I want everybody to know now that the Penguin meme, because the Squidward Steeler thing.
Penguin,
yeah, I made that. I made that with him yelling and Penguin. So yeah. I had to call out.
I've seen it a few times.
Yeah, I had to call out Clark about it. Where's the credit? But yeah, no, I made that. Okay, your boy can make memes too. Okay,
there we go.
Smitty's not the only social media guru on here.
Hey, no, if you follow us on TikTok, I can't take credit for those either. So, what would you consider to be whether it's Dubas, whether it's somebody else? What would you consider to be the first piece of business for whoever the next Penguins GM is?
Buy out Granlund.
Okay.
What? I mean, if you want to say find a goalie, that I feel like that could also be one. But if you buy out Granlund, it gives you more money to find a goalie.
Right.
So I feel like it has to be. There's no way that dude could be on the team. I know I saw who was it, and I don't want to put him on blast, but like Seth Rohrabaugh, I think maybe wrote an article about how Granlund could offer, like, leaves more to be offered.
Yeah, I quoted it and just said, "Hey, I doubt it." With the
yeah, I don't care what could be with Mikael Granlund. That ship has sailed. He needs to be gone. The trade shouldn't have happened in the first place.
It's just a bad fit for the system. Like, first off, I don't think he's the same player anyways that was putting up, that point production. I think that was inflated because of who he was playing with. I think there was a point in time where he was a decent player in Minnesota, but those days are long gone. I think it's a really bad fit in Sullivan's system. Like,
I do too.
So that's why it's like I don't have hope that he's going to suddenly be a competent player, because it's still going to be in Sullivan's system next season. Like, there's nothing that's changing about this.
Yeah, that to me, that's easily number one. I mean, we talked about it with Jesse and Danny when they were on here. Whoever the GM, the first thing, like first day, first hour, okay, this is what you're going to do. This is a requirement in your contract.
Kyle, can you sign here, initial here, sign this? Yeah, sign this. That will buy out Granlund.
Yeah, like, honestly, that's basically how it should go. As he's signing his contract, he should be signing the contract that buys him out, because it should just be one stroke of the pen. I think that's easily the number one. And obviously after that, you've got some holes to fill on this team. You have to rebuild a bottom six. You have to, I would assume, find a goalie. There's no way that they could go into the season with the same goalie tandem, can they?
No, and now I'm worried about, because it looks like Vegas is going to go to the Stanley Cup final. And does that put them in a spot? Like, are they going to bring back Aiden Hill, or does he get like a nice contract in free agency with the success that they've had in the postseason? That was a name that Jesse brought up, but yeah, I'm almost thinking like he might be pricing himself out at this point, or be brought back in Vegas because of the success that he's had.
Yeah, no, I think so too. And then at that point, what does Vegas do with Robin Lehner? I mean, that signing, that contract extension just looks really bad for Vegas right now. But no, I think that goalie needs to be one of the main issues. I just don't think the Penguins can go into the same tandem into the season. And not that they have to sell it to the fans. Like, obviously, like, the fans matter to a certain extent, but like, obviously for hockey operations, hockey moves, the fans are going to say what they want, but the team doesn't care. But how do you sell that to the fans if you go into the season with Tristan Jarry and Casey DeSmith next season, and you're like, we're good, we don't need any improvement?
Did you see the projected contract for Tristan Jarry?
No.
Yeah, I don't even know. 6 years.
No.
Like, yeah,
no.
I mean, it's
I don't even need to hear the money.
It's getting close to 7 million. It's getting close to 7 million. I think it's like 6.7 or something.
Ridiculous. That's ridiculous. He's worth that for like 3 weeks of a season, because that's all he plays.
It's tough. Yeah.
There's no
I love
way
Tristan. I feel so bad talking so negatively about him. But
so do I.
He's not available.
People who listen to this probably think I hate Tristan Jarry. No, I like Tristan Jarry, like, when he's healthy, when he's playing well, but when he's constantly being injured, he's not available for the team. And I'm sorry, I understand that it's a very hockey thing to play through your injuries, but if it's going to hinder you and make you a worse goalie, I don't want you out there. And so that didn't add anything to me this spring whenever he was playing injured and playing worse. But I can't do that. 6 years, almost $7 million. Absolutely not. I'd rather hand out another 6-year contract to a forward before I give him 6 years.
There you go, Jason Zucker.
There you go. Yeah.
That would be, and I can't imagine, any of these GMs, whether it's Dubas, whether it's another one of these guys that seem to come from a more analytical side of things. Very hard to imagine they would be the ones to do that. So I find comfort in that as well. Like, I was talking with my boy Doug about this. It's like, any of these names mentioned, you have a hard time feeling like they're going to bring back Brian Dumoulin, or they're really going to like corner themselves into a spot where they have to bring back Tristan Jarry, or they're going to overpay for Jason Zucker. I know the fans don't want to hear that, because Jason Zucker's awesome. great year last year. Finally, great to see him stay healthy and put it all together. He's a great guy by all accounts. Very easy guy to root for. But man, like they can't do that. They can't give another 30-plus-year-old a long-term contract and give him a raise. Like,
yeah,
it's got to be another team to do it if that's what he's looking for.
Yeah, it'll have to be. And I feel like Dubas and a lot of the other guys that we've talked about, they could be the guys to be like, okay, I'm gonna pull up your JFresh page right now. And you explain to me these percentages.
Yeah.
You explain to me why you have these percentages and see why I should give you a contract. What is your expected goals for? What's your expected goals against? What's your WAR percentage? No,
Kyle Dubas is going to put together a PowerPoint on why their finishing has been down 3 seasons in a row.
Honestly, it would be refreshing, and I understand the hesitation from certain people to have all analytical guys, but I feel like the last 2 GMs we had weren't analytical at all.
I didn't know it existed. Yeah.
And so
there was no point in them having the Penguins have a decent analytics team. They just don't listen to them.
Yeah. And I don't need somebody like Jay Fresh where it's like all analytics all the time, which I love Jay Fresh. Don't get me wrong. I love his stuff. But like, I don't need somebody to be just shoving analytics into all their decisions all the time. But I think it needs to be a much heavier weight on the decisions moving forward. And I feel like you just look at the teams nowadays, how proven it is in certain situations like Carolina, which is awkward because they're about to get swept, Colorado, and I just think, I mean, even Toronto with Dubas, he played into that stuff as well. So teams are gearing towards that. They're moving towards it in all of the decisions they're making. You don't have to make all your decisions heavily based off of the guy's WAR percentage, but I feel like it needs to be heavier place in some of the decisions moving forward. So any of the guys, whether it's Dubas or not, I'm happy because it seems like that'll be at least a little bit of a thought when they're making their decisions.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely going to come into play more than what we've seen recently. So very excited, whatever the future holds for the Penguins. I think we're going to find out before our next episode. So next week we should be talking about who the new GM is, and things are going to get really rolling here because the draft will be here relatively soon. So they got to get this GM hire. They got to get it right. And whoever it is.
Are we trading the pick?
Got to get to work. Hey, again, like this GM could come in and be like, hey, I have a vision for what we're going to do with this 14th pick. All right.
Then I just thought of something before they hired Dubas or whoever it was. Who was the one that made the signing for Alex Nylander? Wasn't it the
assistant GM of Wilkes-Barre?
Imagine if he trades the first round pick for the Penguins before the GM gets there.
For William Nylander.
For William Nylander. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Just bring it all together. I don't know that. Did we before we switch and
just walks in and it's like the scene from Community where Troy walks in with the pizza and everything's on fire and
hey, what are you guys thinking about doing with that 14th pick? Oh, we traded that yesterday.
Our assistant AHL GM traded it.
Yeah. I don't know if we want to touch on, first off, did you read that article from it was a collective effort at The Athletic about like the last 12 months of
I have not. No.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much we want to get into it because a lot of it, I mean, there is a lot of new information, I think, but at the same time, it's just like beating a dead horse when you talk about, what we already knew in terms of the villains of the way that this kind of went down with the Penguins. Obviously, it doesn't paint Hextall in the best light. But like, I think Morehouse honestly came out looking worse from it than anybody else because it was kind of his idea to break up the big three. Like, and Gino, if you know, going back to the way this last offseason went down, at one point we were relegated to the thought where Gino wasn't going to come back. If you remember, we recorded an episode talking about the day before free agency started. We're finished with it.
Yeah.
I went upstairs and Gino re-signed. So we had to come back downstairs and we like continued on with the episode basically. But yeah, Morehouse and Hextall convinced Hextall and they were ready to break up the big three. I am glad that didn't happen. And also, like, I think somebody put out a really good point today. It's like you weren't even like trading them for assets. They were free agents. So all you're doing is like bringing in guys like, okay, say you move on from Letang and Gino, you're bringing in guys like John Klingberg and Vinny Trocheck, and you're still a relatively old team. Now you're just worse.
Yeah.
Like, you're not really getting younger in any way. You're just breaking guys up to break them up at that point. So very thankful that didn't happen. Sid and Letang and even Sullivan, like this is in the article, basically said ignore those guys, talking about Hextall and Berg. Like, don't let them play into your decision. Gino was ready to not sign back in Pittsburgh because of that. He said he didn't trust management. They didn't think he was a good player anymore.
That's sad.
Yeah.
That's just sad that he would get treated that way, that whole situation was handled that way. I mean, Morehouse and Hextall should go down.
Now Morehouse works for the Steelers.
Yeah, Morehouse and Hextall should go down to Market Square, and everybody should just get to punch them or stone them. Can we bring up public stoning again?
I mean, are we starting a petition or something? What, change.org or whatever?
What? I'm sure change.org has a slightly happier sense to the website.
That's good. But yeah, no, they are not painted in a very good light. And then again, it's like a lot of stuff that we knew, but also a lot of new information. So if you are interested and you have an athletic subscription, check that out.
All I had to know was that Hextall had a meeting where everybody put their phones in the middle of the table like they were 5 years old.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say about too how Hextall, I mean, we talked about it a lot too. He couldn't tell them what his vision was. And then so he had to like write it down on pieces of paper, and then he printed out a bunch of copies of it, and then he handed them out.
Yeah, it's like Will Arnett. Will Arnett in The Office. Can you tell us what your plan is?
The incompetency, man.
If I told you, I'd have to kill you.
Yeah. If you give me the job, then you get the plan. So bad. But yeah, it's just like, we're bringing up something that we're past. Hopefully that era of Penguins hockey is gone, and hopefully we don't get back to anything close to that.
Yeah.
However, not that it gets any better to talk about, because we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, not a whole lot to talk about with the Pirates, but I want to touch just on their recent stretch here. So we will be back in about, 15 seconds, and we will wrap up talking about Pittsburgh Pirates baseball. Fun. The Pittsburgh Pirates lost again on Wednesday, the day that we are recording this. Still above 500 for now, just one game above 500 at this point. This weekend, I mean, that could be gone. They could be under 500 by the time, well under actually 500 by the next time we talk, technically.
Mm-hmm.
Just the way that things have trended for them from the beginning of the season, they've now played as much bad baseball. Card. That's crazy. They've now played as much bad baseball to pretty much entirely cancel out the start that they had to the season. Just very little. Right now, it feels like, September of a bad year with what we've seen in May. Like, getting to the point where I'm not even like enjoying watching them anymore.
I am going to reluctantly turn the game on at work tomorrow, because I feel like, what's the point? I feel like I'd rather just be focusing on work than watching the Pirates game. No, I understand that completely. I think we're at the point in the season, which is crazy because we're only in May. We're not even into the summer yet, where it's just so hard to actually turn on the TV and watch these guys put in just terrible efforts. I mean, since we last talked, they're 2-4, so they won 2 more games than they had since the week we talked before that. But it's still just such devastating efforts. Like, it's complete opposite, complete difference from what April was to now. And we sound like a broken record because they're not doing anything. There's really nothing else new we can say, because there's no changes being made to try to make an attempt to get out of this.
This is why bad organizations stay bad organizations, and why the Pirates have been...
They're unserious program.
Yeah. They're a very unserious program. And it's why, like, as a Pirates fan, for as long as we've been Pirates fans, you're almost like numb to it at this point. It's why it's like, I don't even know that I'm necessarily mad. It's
Well, that's
just,
why I don't care. Like, and that sounds terrible to say in May, but it's like they're losing, they're playing terribly, but at the end of the day, I don't care. And I would care a lot more if this was the Steelers being this way or if this is the Penguins being this way. I know that's very sad to say, but I'm just kind of geared towards thinking this way about the Pirates. I want them to do good. I pray that they would get back to the playoffs. But at the end of the day, it's like it's hard for me to care because of how that organization is run versus how the other two are run.
It's almost, well, yeah, you need to like see and feel like the organization cares in order to care. Like, what are the, to your point, like you said, a few minutes ago, what have they tried, doing differently? Like, I understand, like, there's a process, right? Like, you can't always just look at the results. It's about the process, and then the results will come. How can you trust the Pirates process right now? Like, the only thing positive to say about the team right now is in like a month or so, hopefully Dylan Cruz has been drafted by the team. Like,
number one,
that's all
overall,
I got right
baby.
now. Because
who knows? At the rate we're going for back to back number one overall, baby.
I look at this team right now, and it's like even the positive, like Mitch Keller or Andrew McCutcheon. I don't know what the heck is like to even make of Brian Reynolds. Like, it's not like he's been bad. It's just he's only got one homer over like his last month.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like, when a runner's in scoring position, he's not coming through. Connor Joe's cooled off a ton. Same with Santana. G1 Bay shouldn't have a job anymore. Not just in baseball in general. I think he should be unemployed. Maybe thrown in prison. I got some other ideas, but I think Rodolfo Castro needs to play more than he has. I'm just rattling off ideas at this point with the team. They're not doing anything differently. Like, I looked at the lineup every single day that they're putting out, pretty much status quo. We got, Josh Palacios, a 27-year-old non-prospect, Rule 5 pick, playing as much as he is. We're throwing Chris Owings out there because he's the only other guy that can play shortstop, but he can't. I could probably hit better than he. It's a very frustrating team to watch right now, game in and game out, and there's no end in sight for me for this. Like, when are we going to see some significant changes? And even if we do, they're probably not going to work because it's the Pirates.
Well, like I said, we're going to see significant changes in June once we get past the Super 2 and we can call up guys and without touching their service time. And that's when they'll try to change things. And at that point, it'll probably be too late.
Are there even enough reinforcements in AAA?
I don't think there are to make an actual difference, but I think that's when you're actually going to see something happen.
Give you something to like. That's my biggest complaint about this season, because I didn't necessarily expect them to be like in contention for anything this year. I thought we'd kind of see strides to what hopefully 2024 is. But yeah, there's really not even like, give me a reason to watch right now. I don't even know like what I'm supposed to be tuning in for, because Tucupita Marcano, by the way, I didn't give a shout out to yet, I enjoy him. I enjoy watching Tucupita Marcano. Beyond that, I thought Oviedo pitched okay today.
Yeah, and
I mean, I'm watching every game. It's just I end up thinking, okay, hey, they pretty much did nothing to really take home from this.
Yeah, and it's crazy too, because we kind of talked about this last week when I think we were 3 games above 500. Now that we're only 1 game above 500, if we were at 1 game above 500 at this point in the season, we'd still be ecstatic.
Yeah.
But seeing the way that it's rolled out, it's miserable. And like I said, I don't think that the moves that they're going to make are necessarily going to pull them out of it. Like, I don't think there's enough reinforcements, like you were saying, to do it. But I do think if something's going to happen, it will happen in June. I just don't see anything changing before that. That's just not the status quo for the Pirates. It's not how they roll. And also, Austin Hedges is the best player of all time. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Please DFA Dwayne Underwood Jr. as well. I can't do it anymore. I've given him the benefit of the doubt so much, but I don't know. That leash cannot be any longer. I'm hoping when Vince Velasquez comes back off IL that's the move, and you keep Ortiz up here, either, transitioning either him or Oviedo to like a bullpen role, or even somebody, dang it, I don't know who it was. I wish I'd give him credit. It might have been Jim, Northside Notch, said something about maybe piggybacking Ortiz and Rich Hill in their starts, which would be an interesting idea as well. But yeah, I'm over Dwayne Underwood Jr. completely. About Austin Hedges, though, yeah, I like his ceiling at this point as a player is a backup catcher who's clearly, obviously, not there for his offense. And he hasn't even, to me, been like very good defensively. Like I think his biggest thing is pitch framing, and pitchers like the way that he calls a game. Other than that, I'm not seeing any value that he's providing on a nightly basis.
Dwayne Underwood Jr. over his last, over his last 15 year to date this season, he's given up 24 hits, 14 runs.
He started the season well too.
5.5 ERA, 11 walks, and this is all in. He's given up more hits than he has innings pitched, so he's doing well.
Yeah, and if you were to look at it game by game, he started out the year pretty well. So it's like really just within these last.
Let me look at just the last 2 weeks. Dwayne Underwood Jr. last 2 weeks. 8.10 ERA, 7 hits and 6.2 innings pitched, 6 runs. He's giving up as many runs per innings as he's pitching right now. That's bad. That's bad. It's very bad. Robert
So
Stevenson.
I'm over that.
He stunk. Colin Holderman. He's been okay.
Yeah.
There's been a couple guys in the bullpen that have still been okay.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Dwayne Underwood Jr. Maybe he should be thrown in jail too.
I'm down. You don't have to convince me. I'd be down. I don't have anything else. That's it. We can end with ranting about the Pirates Rant podcast. That's what we should call this one.
Because we talked about the Pirates for 10 minutes?
No, because there's an actual podcast called that that doesn't have a lot of fans on Twitter.
Oh, okay.
So for anybody that's watching or listening to this and knows of that person, they're ready to kick out of that. But it's an inside joke, I guess, with a few people.
Dalmy Moreta is one of the only people I like in the bullpen.
Yeah. I'm a fan. I actually, honestly, I think the bullpen, especially for what they are, hasn't been that bad. Like, you think about the fact that Sherrington only signed one major league reliever this year, and he hasn't even pitched, Yarlene Garcia. Other than that, it's like some Rule 5 guys or just guys that were already in the organization. Like, I haven't really had an issue with their performance as a whole. It really just, like, if you DFA Underwood, I'm cool with that.
I agree.
So we'll see. Anything else? We're gonna have a new GM next week.
Yeah, new Penguins GM. No, that's it. Check out the YouTube soon. We're gonna have some new stuff going up.
Yeah. So. Shout out to our friend Sarge. If you watching or listening, you know who Sarge is at this point. I think we're gonna find some different ways to bring you guys content. Primarily, this is a YouTube thing. Again, we're very transparent with this. We have to find ways to put different types of content on YouTube.
We're trying to get
than just a full podcast. Yeah, legit. I mean, that's 100% the reason. But we're also going to do stuff like more like TikTok form stuff as well. So you're going to see stuff that you haven't seen yet from our channel in the very near future. Sarge is going to be a part of that with us, whether it's just helping us like bring it to life or being involved with the content itself. So that would be interesting, and stay on the lookout for that. Subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss when we do that. Leave a like on the video, comment down below, leave us a 5-star review if you're listening somewhere else. Be sure to subscribe everywhere that you can. That link tree that is in our bio and our individual bios as well will take you to all the platforms where you can find us. But I think that's it. As always, sponsored by Teach Barbershop. I don't say that basically ever, but you see their logo in the above Tyler, and it also goes on the ticker down below constantly. Just moved into a new location, so shout out to Christian making big moves over at Teach Barbershop. Yeah, Tyler finally pointed to the specific area where it is on the screen. But we will see you guys.
Okay.
next week, and maybe we'll get new Penguins GM Kyle Dubas on the show. You never know. Never say never. But for Smitty, for Tyler, this has been Around the 412, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.